Here's something strange about American citizenship. Once you've got it, even the President of the United States has a hard time taking it away. And right now, that quiet legal reality is colliding head-on with one of Donald Trump's loudest promises. Because Trump vowed to revoke citizenship from hundreds of naturalized Americans. He said it on the campaign trail. He said it from the Oval Office. He instructed the Justice Department to make it a priority. And according to NPR's reporting from June 2nd, 2026, it is proving a whole lot harder to actually do than the rhetoric suggested. So what's really going on behind the scenes here? Why is a president with the full weight of the Department of Justice behind him struggling to deliver on something he framed as a simple executive action? The answer is buried in a part of American law most people have never thought about. And once you see it, the whole story shifts. Let's back up. The process is called denaturalization. It's the formal act of stripping someone of the citizenship they earned through the naturalization process. And historically, it is rare, genuinely rare. For most of modern American history, denaturalization was reserved for extreme cases. Nazi war criminals who lied their way into the country, human rights abusers, people who committed fraud so severe it called the entire foundation of their citizenship into question. It was not a tool of routine immigration enforcement. It was a scalpel, not a hammer. Trump wants to use it as a hammer, and that is where the friction starts. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about American citizenship. Once you are naturalized, the Constitution treats you in almost every meaningful way, the same as someone born on U.S. soil. The Supreme Court has said this over and over again. Naturalized citizenship is not probationary. It is not conditional on good behavior. It is not something the executive branch can just revoke because it changes its mind about who belongs. To take it away, the government generally has to go to federal court. It has to prove its case. And the standard of proof is high, not the standard you see in a typical civil case, but something closer to what prosecutors face in serious criminal trials. Clear, convincing, and unequivocal evidence. That is the bar. Now ask yourself, how often does the government clear that bar quickly? The answer is almost never. So when Trump talks about revoking hundreds of citizenships, what does that actually translate to on the ground? It translates to hundreds of individual federal court cases, each one with its own judge, each one with its own evidence, each one with its own defense lawyer poking holes in the government's claims, each one taking months, sometimes years. That is not a press release. That is a war of attrition. And the Justice Department, even a highly motivated one, only has so many lawyers. This is the buried part of the story, the part that gets lost when the rhetoric is loud and the headlines are short. Behind every promise to revoke citizenship is a courtroom. And courtrooms run on rules the executive branch does not get to rewrite. But it gets more interesting, because the worry inside immigrant communities, inside legal scholar circles, inside the offices of naturalized Americans across the country, is not really about the legal mechanics. It is about something subtler. It is about the chill. Think about it this way. If you are a naturalized citizen, and there are roughly 25 million of them in the United States, what does it feel like when the president says he wants to strip citizenship from people like you? Even if the law protects you, even if the courts move slowly, even if statistically the odds of your case ever being touched are tiny, the message itself does something. It changes how secure you feel in the country you swore an oath to, and that, according to legal scholars NPR spoke with, may be part of the point. The rhetoric does work, the law cannot. It does not need a courtroom. It does not need a judge. It just needs to be said out loud. So you have to ask, is this really about revoking citizenship at scale, or is it about something else entirely? Here's what the reporting actually shows. The Justice Department has been told to make denaturalization a priority. Resources have been shifted. Cases are being reviewed. But the pipeline is slow. The legal protections are real. And the kind of mass revocation Trump described on the campaign trail is, in the words of the experts NPR consulted, simply not how this works. That does not mean nothing is happening. Cases are being filed. Some will succeed, usually the ones involving genuine fraud during the naturalization process, like lying on an application or hiding a criminal past. Those cases have always been winnable for the government, under any administration. What is new is the volume of attempts, the political framing around them, and the public visibility. But hundreds of revocations, fast, that is not what the system is built to deliver. And this is where you can see the gap between political promise and institutional reality. A president can declare a goal, a president can direct an agency, a president can hold press conferences, but citizenship, once granted, sits inside a fortress of constitutional protection. And that fortress was built specifically to prevent the kind of executive action being promised. Why was it built that way? That is a story worth knowing. In the 1960s, the Supreme Court issued a series of decisions that fundamentally reshaped how the government could treat naturalized Americans. The court was reacting to a long, ugly history. There was a time when the U.S. government did try to revoke citizenship more aggressively. People lost their citizenship for marrying foreigners, for living abroad too long, for political beliefs, for voting in elections in other countries. The court looked at all of that and said, no, citizenship is not a privilege the government grants and reclaims at will. It is a status. And once you have it, the bar to take it away has to be very, very high. That ruling is still the law. It is the wall Trump's promise is running into. So when you hear the headlines about denaturalization, here is what is actually happening behind the scenes. A political promise is meeting a constitutional structure that was designed decades ago to make that exact kind of promise hard to keep. The Justice Department is doing what it is told. The courts are doing what they have always done. And the result is a slow, grinding, case-by-case process that looks nothing like the sweeping action that was advertised. Does that mean naturalized citizens have nothing to worry about? Not exactly, because even a slow process can be a frightening one if you are the target of it. Legal fees add up, stress accumulates. The mere act of being investigated, even if you ultimately win, takes a toll. And advocates point out that the people most likely to face scrutiny are often those without the resources to fight back effectively. So the real story here is not a clean victory for either side. It is a stalemate between rhetoric and reality. The promise was big, the legal toolkit is small, and the gap between them is where millions of naturalized Americans are now living. Here's the question that keeps coming up in the reporting. If denaturalization is this hard and the legal protections are this strong, why make the promise at all? And the answer the legal scholars keep circling back to is uncomfortable. Sometimes the promise is the policy. The threat itself does work. It changes behavior. It shapes who applies for citizenship. It shapes who stays quiet. It shapes how secure 25 million people feel in their own country. That is not enforcement. That is atmosphere. An atmosphere is something the executive branch can absolutely control, even when the courts will not let it touch the underlying law. So what should you take away from all of this? A few things. First, citizenship in America is more protected than the headlines suggest. The Constitution and decades of Supreme Court precedent stand between any president and any mass revocation. Second, the system is slow on purpose. That slowness is not a bug, it is the feature that protects everyone, including you, from arbitrary loss of status. And third, the gap between political promises and legal reality is sometimes the whole story. Not the promise, not the reality. The space between them. That space is where this entire debate is currently sitting, and it is where it will likely stay, case by case, courtroom by courtroom, for a long time to come. Because here's the final thing worth remembering. The American citizenship system was designed, after a lot of painful history, to make stripping someone's status genuinely difficult. The architects of those Supreme Court rulings in the 60s knew exactly what they were doing. They had seen what happened when citizenship became conditional, and they built a wall to prevent it from happening again. That wall is being tested right now, quietly, in federal courtrooms most people will never read about, by lawyers most people will never hear of, in cases that take years to resolve. And so far the wall is holding. Whether it keeps holding, that depends on the courts, on the lawyers, on the judges, and on a constitutional tradition that has weathered louder storms than this one. But the next time you hear a sweeping promise about who gets to be American and who does not, remember the quieter truth underneath it. Citizenship once earned is not easy to take away, and the people who built it that way did so for a reason. That reason is the part of this story that got buried, and now you know it.